Clear to engage. Time on target. 5 mics. Out.
Reagan, how was Christmas?
Well, Christmas was good, Brian. Grew up going to my grandparents' house most of the time for Christmas. So when I got married, I was like, new rule. Christmas Day, we're at home. And that's nice. We'll travel other days, travel around Christmas sometimes. We didn't this year, but being at home for Christmas is the best feeling, I think. You're not missing anything that you need pretty much. We ran to the store a couple of days before, made sure we had all the food stuff that we needed. And then we're good. We're set. And sleep in and all that stuff. So I'm a big fan of, I don't know what you call it, lazy Christmas, but that I enjoy that. I don't like traveling too much for Christmas.
Yeah, I will
What about
say
you?
the traditions are fun, and I think you did. You probably a few years ago with your kids crossed that Rubicon like Vicky and I did when our kids are young and you kind of in your 20s, you kind of just used to go into your parents' house, grandparents' house, and then you have a family of your own, and you're like, and you do it the first 2 years just out of tradition, right? So you pack up all the kids and you haul them all the way over to Portland. For me, we haul them all the way over to Portland, usually on Christmas Eve or something, and then
Yep.
bring them back and haul them to grandma's house. And then we're a couple of years in, we're like, what are we doing? Like they have no kids, they have nothing else to do, grandparents. So I just threw the gauntlet down and said, if you want to see your grandkids on Christmas, you're coming to our house. And now that my kids are, getting close to leaving the house, or at least one in college, and it's fun to have him home for college, and the other one in high school, I think we're moving back to going to see the grandparents. And I've
Yeah.
only got just the dads are left, Vicky's dad and my dad. So we went over to Portland, Gresham for a day to see my dad, my sister, and those guys. But yeah, on Christmas Day, like I did zero. I ended up taking a nap about 2 o'clock. I went and made some coffee, and then I turned it on, and Vicky came in with a cup of coffee, and I was asleep on the couch. And she's like, "Oh, I just let you sleep." And I'm like, "Yes, that's a great Christmas day when I get a nice hour sleep
Nice.
in there." Yeah, it's a good day.
So you didn't even plan your nap. It was an accident.
Yeah, it was. I was watching a boring football game. Just went right to sleep.
So you watch the games on Netflix?
I
This is the
did.
first year they have NFL games. How was did they have good announcers or anything like that?
It's fine. I don't really pay attention to the announcers too much anyways. I mean, they're just calling balls and strikes, right? For the most part. It was funny because I fell asleep during the Beyonce halftime show that everybody's had all this hubbub about um on Twitter, like, oh, she sucks, she's horrible, she's great, all this kind of, it's so weird how they make Beyonce this political figure, and it's like she's just doing a halftime show. Like, it doesn't really matter. And quite frankly, the game was so, I think I tweeted it today, or I replied to somebody when they were the controversy. I said, they go, did you think she was good or bad? And I said, I thought the football game sucked. And I fell asleep, so obviously it wasn't that good. So I think people get, it's just amazing how the intensity of the politicizing like everything somehow or another. And I guess she put herself out there because she did go out and support Kamala Harris and everything. Whether she got paid supporting Kamala, I think that's still up in the air. Whether they were paying these people to show up, I don't know. Why not? I mean, other people pay people to show up for stuff. I mean, I don't know. I don't think that's really super unheard of.
Yeah, I don't think that was really the problem. To me, it was all more about like, do the celebrities actually move the needle? And I think a lot of the celebrity stuff is already like, most people are like, oh, shocker, another major celebrity endorses a Democrat. Like I think a lot of that
Yeah.
is priced in. And I think the extent to which the effort they went through for that seems like it was minimally beneficial for their very short period that they had to run that campaign and having all the money they did. I do think though they ran into a common campaign problem, which is if you get a bunch of money late, and they did really well in the early fundraising, they did well in the mid, they did well in the late. Like Democrats are good nationally at fundraising, especially with small dollars. To have all this money to burn, they don't know what to do with it, and so they put it into whatever they can think of. And a lot of that stuff, like building sets, fake sets to do podcast interviews. They spent like, I don't know, $100,000 on a set or something like that for a 30-minute podcast interview, stuff like that. And that's when you got money to burn. I mean, you just, that's the stuff that happens, right? And there is no more, there isn't any more media to buy and all that stuff. So I think that's probably why that ended up happening, would be my guess. Is they were like, okay, instead of just an endorsement, can you do something bigger? Here's a bunch of money. Can your production company figure out something to do with it? So that's probably what happens. But again, I think the effort they put into that stuff probably didn't have the return they were hoping for in terms of turning out youth vote.
We get late money all the time in state and local races and stuff that comes in like the last week. And they're like, oh, I got an extra 10 grand. And I'm like, it literally, it does nothing. I mean, it really doesn't. I wish it did. And it doesn't mean that we don't take it and use it. The Dems get it too. Like both sides of the aisle get this late money that comes in, and it comes from all different places, right? It comes from private donors, lobby, just comes from different places, and it always comes late. And I don't know. The mentality is maybe they want to come in and save the day, be the last one to give, and you come in over the top. But when you're working on races and consulting and stuff, it's so difficult to deal with late money because the effectiveness of a $10,000 check in the last week, I would say probably borders in the 15% category of, so it's basically like getting $1,500 in August. Just because you can use that $1,500 in August to do so much more than that $10,000 in the last week of October, I think.
That's what I was going to say, Brian. I would imagine, having been a campaign manager, consultant, and I assume it's the same for candidates, you remember the people who were there for you early. You remember the people who were bought in at the beginning. I don't remember the late. You don't remember the late money. You remember the people who were there from the beginning, who believed in you. And sometimes that's hard because like the corporate lobby is just trying to pick winners and make their score sheets look good for their clients and whatnot. So it's sort of like, yeah, we gave money to this candidate before they won, and it was a week before they won, and everybody knew they were going to win and stuff. Like, sure, you're right on the technicality, but I don't think you did a lot for yourself there.
But they didn't do it. And part of their strategy, corporate lobby especially, because I'll get those checks and they're dated August 26th, and you get them the last week of October.
Yeah, what are you sitting on them for that long for?
I think they do it on purpose. There's a strategy to it, and they know that it's not going to be as effective, but they get the benefit of giving money, and and it's just a sad way of doing business. And they think somehow or another that we missed the fact that we saw the date of the check of August 26th on there. Yeah. I mean, it's just and there's a few number of people that literally are notorious for doing this. And some of the other PACs that are out there, there's some really good ones that come in early. They give some money in July, August, and then they maybe do a second round. I'm thinking like OBI is usually, that sort of group that does that. Like they'll come in and do their first round of funding, and then they, I think this year they were, because of Measure 118, they were struggling with a lot of making sure they funded all of that stuff, and there was a lot of money going to defeat that Measure 118, and then they kind of came in late. But normally they're like early August with a round of money, and then like first week of October, in those groups, because then they're trying to see what the lay of the land looks like, first. And that makes sense to me. You kind of do an initial round of funding. Realtors tend to do something like that too, or at least they had traditionally. But we'll see. I mean, but there's some that are the corporate checks. Like I'm thinking of, trying to throw somebody under the bus, like an AT&T or something, that was, and I'm just using that as an example. I actually don't, again, to your point, I don't remember who the people. I remember OBI giving Dick Anderson $10,000 in July. I don't remember when AT&T money came in, so it does go to show you that I think people do remember the early money better than they remember the late money.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think, AT&T, they've been around a long time. What do they care about an individual state legislator? I mean, that's kind of fair, right? They're a
Nah,
giant corporation.
they're
How
giving
how hard are
500
you
bucks
gonna
to every
they care
incumbent who
about
doesn't.
the FCC. That's what they care about.
Yeah.
They're like, if you screw up the FCC, we're gonna have some problems. But otherwise, we're fine, right?
Well, they did care about that. What was it, 25 cents that we put on the cell phone tax that
Yes.
legislators
Yes.
voted for last time? They did care about that. They were trying to lobby to beat that one. So, and because once
Yes.
that thing gets on the books, it's sure a lot easier to raise that from 25 cents to 35 cents.
Well, and when you're a utility too, that's the thing is there's all these different kinds of billing mechanisms and stuff like that. And you hear about these ideas about, putting a $10 fee on, electric bill or whatever like that. Those companies do not want to become a conduit for collecting government money as much as possible. It
Yeah.
increases their cost for them to do their business. It increases their scrutiny from the government typically. And once you start doing that, it's hard to stop it. You won't ever stop it, but then people keep trying to add new stuff, new
Yeah.
fees, all that stuff, and you just it just becomes a nightmare. And if I were them, I would be like, I don't want to do this. Please do not make us do this. Cell phone companies, they're kind of a big regulated utility type thing. And so electrical will probably try to beat that back as much as they can.
It's fair. That makes sense to me. I mean, why? And then also,
Yeah.
they tend to take the PR hit for making your cell phone bill really big, right? I mean, the government
Right.
doesn't take the hit.
Yeah.
They sit there and try to put it out in bold letters on your thing. Well, we're only charging you this much, but your taxes are, and
Yeah.
but they're still pissed at AT&T and Verizon or whoever. So it is an interesting thing.
Yeah. All right. Well, we better get started for what the people came here for. They came here for a
Right.
legislative Christmas, and we got legislative Christmas on the 23rd and the 24th. So on the 23rd, we got the Senate committee assignments for 2025. And then the next day we got House assignments for 2025. So since Senate came first, Brian, I was gonna go through that. Maybe I'll let you do Senate and I'll do House since that's kind of our division of labor this
Yeah.
session.
Yeah, right. It is kind of funny. You're over there and I'm, in the upper chamber now. So, um, I was it a bunch of, I would say not a lot of big changes on the Senate. I think the ones that I wanted to
Yeah.
highlight is really the new committee that the brand new Senator Lisa Reynolds was able to chair, early childhood and behavioral health. We
Yeah.
advocated about breaking behavioral health off and having its own separate. And I think President Wagner and his group in there must have seen or heard the wisdom of our discussions. And of course they added early childhood. I guess I can kind of see how behavioral health and early childhood go together, but it's still a little bit of a stretch for me.
Well,
But
and Brian, I think
anyways,
the reason that happened is because you got Reynolds as chair and she's working on her momnibus, and so that's a quote unquote early childhood stuff, and so it's an easy way for her to she probably got a chance to sort of brand her committee a little bit about this.
yeah,
Sometimes they get chances to do that when you have a committee that's not super established. Like you're not going to go around necessarily and change all the scope of finance and revenue, right? But when you've got a new committee or whatever, you get to pull some topics together. Senator Manning got to do this a couple years ago when he expanded veterans to foreign
yeah.
and world affairs, that kind of stuff. So my guess is she got the opportunity maybe to kind of put that together because it's a space that she's been working in. So kudos to her.
Yeah.
It'll be exciting to have her in the Senate. I think we worked really well. Knope's office worked really well with Reynolds' office. She was often a sponsor of our bipartisan bills early on, and she was one of those ones that would get on early, and it would make it possible for us to get other Democrats on board, and that's huge, honestly, in the building. So kudos to her for that. Hope you
Yeah.
guys, Anderson gets to work with her as vice chair. So you guys have been doing a lot in Reynolds' office. We love Chris, of course, the mayor of the Paul Bunyan, the mayor of Philomath,
Yeah, right.
out there. So you'll get a chance to work with him a bunch on that.
Should be and then Senator Diane Lithicum will join Anderson on that committee, and I think that's a good
Mm-hmm.
spot for Senator Lithicum. I think she appreciates the early childhood stuff, and I think that'll be good to have her on there. Nobody wanted to be on education, so that one really kind of didn't change. We won't go back into that one. I think the other one that is significant in our world is housing and development. where now that Majority Leader Jama, he was no longer, usually when you're majority leader, it's really tough because you're running floor strategy and all the things you need to do.
Hmm.
It's very difficult to chair committees and as well as be the majority leader. So he moved on and sent a new senator, Confam, will take over the helm there with Anderson being the vice chair. And then we're seeing two new members to that one. So Senator Anthony Broadman from Bend and Senator Todd Nash. So so now you got an Eastern Oregon, the coast. So we basically have rural Oregon and, um, you know, urban Oregon with the
Yeah.
Democrats. So that's going to be interesting dynamics there. I think Broadman brings an interesting approach from Ben from a super fast growing community and kind of some of the issues that they've had to deal with there. I'm hoping will help enlighten some of that committee around, permit times and, the ability for the availability of land and some of those discussions that are not fun to discuss, but we do
Well,
need
and
to have
not
them.
necessarily specific to Broadman, but he'll run into the same thing that Deb Patterson and others have on this committee. Do you want to build houses or do you want to be pro environment? Because those two things are heavily at odds right now.
Yeah.
That's no secret. And so
Yeah.
basically on housing and development, you got to pick. And for the most part, when it mattered, Patterson picked environment, right? Voting no on that bill on the floor in the Senate.
Mhm.
And so Broadman's choice now is he going to be pro housing? Is he going to be pro environment? And because the environmental movement is so anti housing, that's the choice he has to make. And so it'll be interesting to see as the session goes on. I mean, there's not going to be a ton in housing compared to the previous session. It doesn't seem like the governor is rolling as hard on that front. They're going to have a concept, a big concept, but I think it's going to be much more tinkering around the edges, and there's going to be funding for there was big shelter funding work group, so
Yeah.
it's going to be a lot less hands on. But when the chance to do production with what we're calling it in the legislature, doing production, where's he going to be? I think that'll be interesting to watch because Ben's been pretty. Bend City Council has given their lobbyist Eric Kanzler a lot of leeway, or they're giving him direct orders to go pro production and push for all the stuff the governor wants to do because they're in such a bad housing crunch in Bend, and because the starter home is cost you $750. Like that's really bad. That's really rough compared to like 350, 450 in the rest of the state, and even in growing areas part of the state. So
Yeah.
that's a challenge. So it'll be interesting to see how he navigates that on
It will
housing.
be. That'll be a good one. Judiciary, I just a quick note, Robin and was on that one as well. And
Yep.
then and Mike McLean, the former judge, now back into the building as a senator, who's
Rep
a
Judge
lawyer. So
Senator
that should
McLean.
be maybe some interesting fireworks there. I think Mike's a pretty good arguer, so I think that's I'm looking forward to they're 4 days a week of judiciary. You didn't get your wish, by the way. They're still doing 4 days of
What
judiciary,
a nightmare.
which is
What a
just
nightmare.
crazy. Maybe they'll talk about actually putting criminals in jail instead of figuring out how to not.
Doubt,
I,
very much
I,
doubt it. But I do think McLean will be a really good voice on that committee. Again, Broadman sort of has to pick if he wants to be, pro criminal or anti criminal on that committee. So he's in
yeah.
a district that I think it's going to be hard for Republicans to challenge. But again, he posted himself up as a moderate. How's he going to play that going into the session? Where is he going to be?
Because you got some
He got a lot of
interesting.
law enforcement support, so he could be pro law
Yeah.
enforcement.
Yeah. Well, you just have some interesting members there with Kim Thatcher and James Manning and Fred Gerard and Sarah Gelser Bluen. I mean, it's an interesting
Mm-hmm.
makeup committee, just knowing those personalities. I look forward to some of those interesting debates. So Daniel Bonham, the minority leader, kept his vice chairmanship of labor and business,
Mm-hmm.
which is also normally not the case. As your minority leader, you're usually busy doing a bunch of things. So I thought that was interesting that he kept his vice chair of labor and business and didn't give that to another member.
Yeah,
I thought that
that
was
is
interesting.
interesting.
Yeah. and maybe he's worried about some things coming down the pike in there behind the scenes. But I just know how busy working for the last two minority leaders were. It's hard to run to be vice chair in that group when you're trying to run everything
Mm-hmm.
else basically as minority leader. But we'll see. And then the only other one I was going to highlight it is really just joint ways and means because we had some changes
Can we
there.
do
So,
natural resources for a second? Because this is something interesting
oh,
too. So
sure,
Todd
yeah,
Nash, a new member, becomes vice chair. Gerard becomes a regular member, and David Brock Smith moved over to E&E because there was I think Finley was the vice chair of E&E. So David Brock Smith gets a good spot, vice chair there, but Gerard gets knocked down, which I think is really interesting. Why that happened. So I don't know why, but I thought I saw that and I got because
well,
Gerard
that's
is a
the only
longstanding member and been vice chair. So
Yeah, maybe that's the only vice chair that Todd got, and he probably really wanted natural resources coming from the Cattlemen's Association.
yeah, no, I think I
But
mean
Jeff
he doesn't.
Golden
It's
is
not weird that Nash is there. I just thought it was weird that they took Gerard off. So
that is odd, yeah. And well, and I don't, hopefully Gerard and Nash get along. Because
yeah,
again, it's when you got Golden and Prozansky on that committee, I mean, it's tough. I mean, they're definitely liberally bented, I would say. And
yeah,
Jeff Golden hasn't been a fan of or done well, I don't think, with the wildfire stuff that's come through. So that's going to be interesting how that plays, and hopefully Todd,
yeah.
can figure some things out. So
Also, rules with Thatcher that's a totally different look than we've seen before. So I don't know if this was like Bonham asked for Thatcher on there. She is, I think, on leadership.
uh-huh.
Man, maybe she.
No,
So and she's not on
it's
leadership.
just
Maybe she was
Anderson
before,
and
and she's
DBS.
so with Bonham and Thatcher. I would say that's a totally different look than Hansel Knope. Hansel and Knope were
Yep.
two of the more workable, understanding, bipartisan type members, and I would say that's not how I would describe Thatcher. And then Bonham's there as the leader, obviously. But so that is super interesting to me to see the makeup of rules get swing hard to the right. Again, I would guess Bonham asked for that if he got some input into these, but who knows? So that's
Usually,
interesting to see.
usually the majority party lets the minority leader pick who they want on rules. And that tends to be, at least that's historically been the case. But you're
Yeah,
right. I mean, I found it interesting. One, the two of them, but also both of them aren't going to be back. So
right.
I would have thought you'd want to maybe mix it up and put somebody on there that, you know, could be dealing with some issues and kind of can get some historical context, 2 years from now too. So, because neither
Yeah.
one of them will be around in 2 years. So
Yep.
I thought, yeah, that's a good call. And then of course, Ways and Means, right? The committee everybody wants to
Yeah.
on. Senator Kate Lieber will be co-chair with Fred Gerard as co-vice chair. Senator Janine Salmon. Anthony Brodman worked his way onto Ways and Means. I mean, he worked his way onto some stuff. Anthony Brodman did.
Mm-hmm.
Brock Smith got what he's always wanted, which was Ways and Means. Senator Lou Frederick's been there a long time. Senator Mike McLean made his way onto Ways and Means as well. I'm sure his history in the House. I'm sure that probably helped him with that scenario. And then Senator Campos, she's been on there. And of course,
Yep.
Senator Bonham's going to replace as the minority leader. And then Senator Aaron Woods is new. And then
Mm-hmm.
Senator Dick Anderson returns as well on that one. So that's, I think, a decent makeup for us on the
I
right.
didn't hate it. And
Yeah.
it's super interesting because if you look, here's who they replaced. So Dembro left. He was always going to be needed to be replaced on Ways and Means. That was an open seat. So I don't know if that one went
Yeah.
to Broadman or to Woods. But then Gelser is off of full. And that is fascinating to me.
That is.
Like, why did she want off or did she get kicked off? And I think that is to be determined. And I don't know if the people, here's the thing that's a total inside game in terms of your relationships and stuff like that. The really good ones don't let that stuff phase you, right? It's not obvious, but we'll see what happens. But that is definitely interesting. And there were some interesting changes on the House side of Ways and Means, I think, that are definitely going to need to be looked at too as well. Bryan, is that your phone ringing?
No,
I heard a phone.
no, it wasn't me.
Oh, jeez.
So, and I went back and looked. So Gelser's only got the chair of human services.
Yeah. And I
And
think she's
so,
on Human Services sub as well.
yeah, yeah.
But that's Campos. And I think that was Campos last time
Hmm.
too. So
Interesting. And then the other
um,
one, just to say, the Joint Committee on Transportation. So, I mean, Gorsuch obviously returning as
big
co-chair,
committee.
but I think Bruce Starr coming in and
Yeah.
replacing Boquist as co-vice chair. And then you have Mark Meek and then Weber coming on there. And then, of course, you have Confam as well. So, and she worked her way into a bunch of stuff as well. So she's
Hmm.
done a good job. And that's going to be an interesting committee. There should be a lot of action. That's the Senate committees as we see them.
There it is. All right. I'm going to pull up the House committees here. And try to pull up at the same time the old ones, because that's what I think is interesting always, is to compare these to the last ones. And that's the trick too, if you kind of want to see, maybe get a look into some of these dynamics of what's going on. And they did some changes obviously for when Fahey took over from Rayfield. There was some expansion of committees. They broke up business and labor. I think that was to get more gavels. I get why you do that, but it obviously makes things a lot more complicated for people trying to track your bill, because your bill comes out of labor and business in the Senate, and then you're like, so where's it going?
Yeah.
One of three ways, rules. It could go a lot of different directions. So we've got ag, land use, and natural resources. So the big change here really comes down to something that was new for the interim with Fahey, is co-chairs. So we've got co-chair Helm and co-chair Owens, Democrats and Republicans. Owens has told people this doesn't mean that he's equal power. But I think that what does it mean? Hopefully it means he gets to sit in all of the meetings that they want to have. When you want to meet with the chair, Helm saying, hey, there's co-chairs here, so you got to meet with both of us. That would be, I think, a good bipartisanship type of a thing. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays throughout the session. And one way to take the temperature of the session might be if he gets kicked off of co-chair back to vice chair, then we might see that things aren't going that well this session. So that's something to watch out for this session. But if it goes really well, maybe we end up seeing more co-chairs. The real question is it going to be real bipartisanship, or the kind of like fake bipartisanship that tends to permeate the building? We drafted this bill in secret. Would you like to be the chief co-sponsor? You have to sign on to it. We can't change a word of it, and you get third comment in the Democrat press release. Sometimes we do that, sometimes we don't, right?
Well, the only thing I would say, though, I mean, if they truly wanted that committee to be truly 100% bipartisan, they would have made it an equal committee too, and they didn't do that.
And right, and I think that that's a good indicator as well. Is there? Trying to remember if there was a Senate committee this year they did make equal, but I can't. Well, I'll have to go back and look at that.
Well, a couple of ways and means, some of that stuff.
Yeah. The other thing that the House has that I don't really like coming from the Senate, but it is what it is. You get Democrat vice chairs in these committees. You have a chair, you have a Democrat vice chair, and a Republican vice chair. And Sarah Finger McDonald from Corvallis, from Rayfield's old district, is on as the vice chair of Ag. That's interesting. I don't necessarily, she was a school board member. I didn't necessarily think of her as an Ag person. So I need to go back and look if there's something in her bio that I missed, but I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Odd pick, yes.
Yep. House now mirrors that Senate. They had the behavioral health and healthcare committee, and I'm pulling up my list to see if it was the same. So yeah, they did that first, and now the Senate has copied them. But they put behavioral health with early childhood. We have early childhood and human services. Again, a lot of that saying the same thing, slightly different titles, but you've got Nose coming back to chair that. One of the big changes that happened in the interim, Lively took over climate committee. That was previously Pam Marsh, I believe. And so Lively is kind of looked at as a much more moderate, kind of one of the last few moderates hanging around in the Democrats as far as moderates go. And so that was considered a big win for business interests who tend to like Lively. So it'll be interesting to see how that committee goes. But you've got that commerce and consumer protection. Oh, go ahead.
There's 12 people on that committee, which I thought was interesting. So 7-5 split.
That's right. And the House has rules about your committees. So in the House rules somewhere or the committee rules, there is a ratio. And so depending on how many Democrats you have and Republicans, it'll change the ratio of how your committees are supposed to be, whether they're supposed to be 1+ for the majority or multiple. This is 2+. Because we're in the super minority, I think that ratio changed for some of the committees. Depending on how big you make them is your ratio. And this is one of those bigger committees for sure. So early childhood and human services chair Hartman, which is a little bit of a challenge because I'm going to Olis and the interim committee doesn't have a chair, and I can't remember why that is. Oh, that's because Reynolds left.
Yeah.
Reynolds left, and so she's gone. So Hartman takes over that chairmanship. Early childhood and human services. Again, not necessarily something that I think of her working on necessarily, but I didn't pay a ton of attention to the House last cycle either. Economic development keeps Daniel Wen, but it looks like a deal. Oh no, he was vice chair of that one before. See, this is my problem, is not knowing the House committees. They're all new to me. Education remains with Courtney Neron, and Tweet Tran keeps emergency management. Zach Hudson, I believe, had higher ed before as well. Marsh is new. Homelessness. Judiciary is corrupt again. Graber is labor and workplace standards. Revenue remains with Nathanson, and Bowman continues. Honestly, these didn't change a ton. They swapped in some new members and whatnot. But because Fahey did her big, change up during the interim when she took over from Rayfield, there just wasn't as much to change. I think they kind of did half or more of the work already. Honestly, it was just about slotting in people whose schedules worked, right? I think the big change comes on Ways and Means, and so I'm going to pull up the House membership from last time.
And rules was a big change. So Drazen brought her friends. Yes. I mean, and then Anna Scharf got the boot for Shelley and Lucetta Elmer, which I thought was kind of interesting. So that clearly tells you that the speaker let her choose her members. Yes. So
I think the one downside to losing Wallen is you don't have a lawyer on that committee when you're dealing with like election law and stuff like that, which can be a benefit. But I think it's probably a big deal for Drazen to get to pick her leadership team and put them on there.
But I think Wallen and Scharf did a pretty good job on rules. I mean, in years past. So I think they both are, especially Wallen. I mean, she's, like you said, she's an attorney. She knows what she's doing, and she's pretty good about drilling into agencies and some of those things with rules. And I don't know. I mean, not having a lawyer there in rules could be interesting.
She does continue on. I think she's vice chair of judiciary, but I have to double check that. But which is obviously a good, good use of her talents. And Willie Chotson, the new rep, also vice chair on judiciary. Again, not something I was aware of as his background. Mannix is there. That makes sense. Tom Anderson's there. That makes sense. Sort of interesting to see who they slot into some of these spots sometimes. So Ways and Means, though. So I'm going to read you the Democrats that were on Ways and Means before, and then tell me if you notice anything. We had Valderrama, so she stays. Con Pham, who left for the Senate, so you got one open seat. Owens remains. Susan McLean is not on Ways and Means anymore. Kevin Mannix, not on Ways and Means anymore. Rick Lewis, not on Ways and Means anymore. Paul Hovey was already leaving, so that was 2 free seats that the Dems got. Helfrich, who's not leader, so you sort of see why he gets taken off of Ways and Means. Same thing with, like, you were trading Knope for Bonham, but Knope wasn't coming back on the Senate side. And then Paul Evans, Vicky Breeze Iverson. So, and then you have your obviously your co-chair stayed the same with Greg Smith, and Towna Sanchez continues to that chairmanship. So 4 members, 2 of them because they were leaving, 2 of them because they weren't, that were taken off. And so here's the new lineup for Ways and Means. You got Ben Bowman, who is new to Ways and Means. Nice spot for a majority leader, honestly. And rare, I think, in the majority leader.
That's rare too,
situation. Like Taylor and Lieber might have had a seat on Ways and Means while she was majority leader, but I don't remember. So big deal for him. Vicky Breeze-Iverson remains. Jamie Kate is back after having been removed for either Mannix or Owens. I don't remember which, Rayfield. So maybe Fahey attempting to sort of right a possible wrong decision there, or feeling like there was a wrong decision made. Drazen is the leader, is there basically in place of Helfrich, I'm assuming. Evans, Emerson Levy, and Ricky Ruiz, I think, are the two big ones. You put two swing seaters who've now survived 2 elections, or one first and then survived their reelection. That's a big difference, I think, from having Pham on there and even Susan McLean, who's in a safe seat. These guys are, in a potential swing seat, but they've proven themselves to be able to hold in there. But I feel like the mod, quote unquote, swing seats or mods or whatever you want to call them, really struck back and did well in the full Ways and Means appointments. And to me, that this Ways and Means feels less left wing than the last one, which is super interesting because they picked up seats in the supermajority. But I do think that possibly they're looking for some voices that are going to be a little bit more like, hey, let's slow down on the big spending. And so they're trying to bring in a few more of those folks who aren't going to be as aggressive pedal to the metal in case we do still have a downturn here in the next 6 months, year, or something like that. I don't know. What was your read on that? I thought it was interesting.
Well, yeah, I think a couple things. One, I believe that Ben Bowman probably, I mean, I don't know for sure on any level, but I think bringing in a couple of these people that he came in with, or was kind of helping, so, and Emerson and Ricky were 2 of the races that he obviously helped fund their re-elections and stuff and be part of that. And he was probably looking for some other people on that they kind of mix it up a little bit, I think, on that committee. And so I thought that was the Jamie K one. I know a little bit more of the inside baseball on that thing. And I think that her getting back to Ways and Means where she was originally, and quite frankly, now she's one of the older members, which is kind of interesting to think about too. So you have to look at longevity. I think Rick getting dumped off of Ways and Means is I don't know if that was by his own choice or he was removed. I'm not sure. I'm not involved in any of that discussion, but I thought that was, and he's been there a long time too, and that's that was kind of interesting. So if you say, well, you put her on there because she's been there 6 years, and you're like, well, Rick's been there longer than that. So I don't know. Maybe, but I do like the makeup. I mean, my read is
I do too.
With Paul Evans has been fairly, he's not a spender, he's not a tax and spender. So I think that's pretty good. I mean, Emerson's and Ricky both touted being bipartisan and all the things. So, and being moderate. So that should be pretty interesting to see how it plays out. And I think, Rep Gomberg has proven himself to be a decent moderate, so I think there's that as well. Could be.
Valderrama looks, just you look at the names and you go, wow, Valderrama looks real lonely out there on full Ways and Means. You feel bad. Hopefully, and here's the thing too. I think Valderrama now
and Sanchez.
We have that awful setup where we don't have a committee table that's big enough for all these members. And so the 2 newest ones, the newest lowest ranking one from the House and the lowest ranking one from the Senate, have to sit at the kids table. And that's no longer Valderrama. So congratulations to her. She's moved up in the seniority. Emerson or Ricky is going to get that honor, I think, unless they don't count. But Kate's been there longer, I think.
Do they count time on committee or do they count time in the building?
That I don't know. I might need to email Elpro or whoever sets up that seating and ask them, because that would be fascinating. But so there's a big committee room. The reason that we don't have this is because we don't have the basement. 150 in the basement, whatever that committee room was, hearing room 50 is double the size of a regular committee room. It's huge, and it had a giant table. And there's a render somewhere in the Capitol what it's going to look like, and it's going to be a beautiful, fancy committee room, and it's going to be awesome, but I don't think it opens until after the session is over. And so we've got 1 more year of this kids table silliness, which I get why they have to do it, but it looks horrible, and you feel bad for the member that's got to sit down there because it really takes them down a notch. I always thought it should rotate. Just somebody has to sit there and y'all get a turn, except for, probably the co-chairs, because what's they got the gavels, right? You can't sit down there with the gavel. But the kids table thing is rough, and so
They
somebody
could
has
just
to endure
shove.
that for another 6 months.
Thought they don't they have enough room where they could just put a table on the end of it and just continue the dais to be a little longer. Like you're doing construction in the entire building, like do something with that to make it a little bit better for the
I
actual members. Yeah,
Right.
that
You
could
could
be
move L Pro
something.
down there too. I mean, obviously you don't get, your member doesn't get to whisper to L Pro, but whatever. I think it's just how it is. And I don't know if they put multiple L Pros up there, but even if they just had one, where if it was just
Yeah,
the
I think
LFO officer, but
if the co-chairs really cared about their members, they would fix that.
I think that would be nice. That's what I think.
Oh wait, does the Senate? So is it only the House that has to go to the small table, or the Senate?
No, because
Campos
it was
sat there.
Campos
Yeah.
and Valderrama, and Campos did it as a senator. So I think they pick one senator and one rep that sit at each side because they seat it from left to right, from far left to the far right. From the far left is all Senate,
Yeah.
and then Senate co-chairs
It's
and
got to
vice
be
chairs, and
Brobin.
then
Brobin from the
from.
Senate.
Oh, that's right.
Got to
Oh,
be
poor
Brobin. So he
Broadman.
gets a small table.
Kids table Broadman. That's rough. That's rough.
Brobin and Ricky probably. I mean,
Yeah, that's what I
I'm
would think.
guessing, or him and Levy would probably have to like flip a coin to see who,
Yeah, exactly.
because they both been there the same amount of time, right? Ricky won in 2020, or no? That he was he
Listen,
2018? No, he was
listen
20.
though,
No, he's
these
2020.
are all recorded. This matters to people where they sit and all that stuff. I mean, you think about that. You think about all the charts. If you ever watch The West Wing, they make jokes about the seating charts and who you can and can't sit next
Oh
to each
yeah.
other and all that stuff. This is real stuff. I think some people think this is silly, but it is real. It affects how your meetings, who you sit next to each other affects how your meetings go too. And are they just like
Absolutely.
classroom? Are they talking? Are they passing notes? Do they hate each other? Are they in love with each other? All that stuff matters. Hopefully we don't have too much of that going on, but
That's
and then
behind the scenes.
transportation committee in the House. We've got McLean remains the co-chair, Susan McLean. We want to make that clarification now. Mike McLean is back. You get that mixed up. And then you've got Helfrich, Mannix, and Bossart Davis, who I think is sort of the vice chair, although in this listing of transportation committee, she doesn't have vice chair title, but I think she's basically the vice chair. And then you've got Evans, Gamba, Nathanson as the three Democrats rounding that out. And I would say Gamba is probably the most, I don't know what you call it, bike Portland friendly member there.
Yeah,
But
totally.
it'll be really interesting to see the transportation package develop, especially because most of the building doesn't have anything to do with it. It's kind of leadership plus the transportation people, and then it sort of shows up in Ways and Means, and we go, "Wow, this is what you guys came up with." Usually, so anyway, it'll just be fascinating. I've never been through transportation package. I wasn't working in the building when we did the 2017 transportation package, so this will be fun and interesting, I think.
Well, from the ER standpoint, I think that Shelley's obviously comes from the trucking background. So, I mean,
Right.
with, and she's done I would say she's done an admirable job of like highlighting the trucking issues within transportation within Oregon. And especially like with the I-5 bridge and all of the things of getting trucks through Portland. Like we talk about a lot is like, how do we get trucks through Portland or around Portland? And I think, so we know she'll be pushing that sort of discussion in there, and Jeff kind of coming from the I-84, side of the world, out there in Hood River and stuff. And he knows what's going on. So I think we got a pretty good, and Mannix is pretty strong there. Of course, he really wanted that train from Salem to Portland, and I, me, I am not a fan of public transportation, especially a new train, a high-speed rail. Like, how's that going for California right now? Not going very well.
I will say, so going back to the Senate transportation real quick, just to double check my math here. 0, you're going to hear this, I guarantee it. 0 Eastern or Central Oregon people on transportation.
Yeah.
And I think that's interesting because a lot of
on either House or Senate,
those are the people that have to drive the most and have to go the furthest distances to get to stuff. And so I think that's going to be a common. I think the Eastern and Central Oregon people, if they all get together and complain about the transportation package, that's going to be effective. They're going to have to kind of build a power base there to say, hey, maybe pave some of these roads too.
Guess we're not plowing the snow over here, Reagan.
That it honestly makes me crazy because ODOT didn't even this time. They're saying, well, we may not be able to plow the snow. Now it looks like we're going to get through a season that's not very bad on the snow front, which is really nice. The passes haven't been terrible, at least from what I'm hearing and what I've seen when I've driven them. But they're just not. It's the first thing they cut, and it's so crazy to me that that's the first thing that they're going to cut, and it makes me irritated. So anyway,
all right, moving on.
Well, one thing I wanted to touch on really fast, because Lisa Reynolds goes to the Senate post-election, there's a full term there basically that they get to fill. Some lucky son of a gun is going to get inaugurated right before probably the session, or maybe right as we start the session, going to get sworn in. And they are now, if you're a state rep, you want to push to get sworn in before all the new people get sworn in, so you have seniority over them for offices the next time around. Because you'll get booted up to the top of the list. You won't get it because everybody's, I think, already chosen their offices, and they won't reset that for the new person from 34. So you'll get bumped at the very end, but then you'll jump in seniority and get to pick way before all the new people. So if you're the person that wins, try to get sworn in before all the other reps get sworn in. This is important stuff, because sooner you get a corner office, right, Brian? So anyway, there's two names that are floating. Two names that are floating around. Sarah Fisher Beachy and Alexandria Goddard are two names that have sort of surfaced in this news article I'll put in the show notes about this vacant district, House District 34, which has Washington County communities of Bethany, Oak Hills, Cedar Mill, parts of Beaverton, and Hillsborough. So the parties are going to have to meet and choose. Alexandria Goddard is actually a legislative aide for Chris Gorsuch, Senator Gorsuch, right now. I've worked with her, enjoyed working with her. I think you have a similar experience, Brian. Yep. So interesting to see her jump in there. I'm always interested in staff that are making the jump into being, trying to become a member. I always think that's super interesting. And then Sarah Fisher Beachy, and I didn't know much about her. I pulled her up on LinkedIn. So here's her sort of bona fide. She was an intern for Congressman Steny Hoyer in 1997. She worked as an administrative assistant for the Ohio Democratic Party in the 98 election. She was a legislative aide in the Ohio Senate from 99 to 2005. So also kind of a staffer, making the jump to being a member, but in a different state. And then for the past 5 years, she spent 5 years as community partner coordinator for Beaverton Education Foundation, and now works for Washington County, North Bethany County Service District 4 Roads. Quite a long name there. Love long agency names. Anyway, newer to Oregon, looks like she moved here around between 2005 and 2015, somewhere in there, moved to Oregon. So she's also put her name forward, and then we'll see who else gets there. But both, I'll link them up. They both have websites. They're both going for it. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes. Brian, what's your take on some of this stuff? I think I sent you or put these links in our notes this morning so you could look at them. But
I'm I'm a huge fan for Goddard. I think that she knows the building. She can step into the role. Like, if you're looking for somebody who can move into the role, I think she could easily do it. I think some of our best members, I may be a little biased, but Drazen and Brees Iverson were both staffers. True. I think that there's something to be said about being a staffer and coming back into the building as a member. I think that you also understand what it is to be a staffer, and you kind of understand how to get things done a little bit more so than and the Beachy stuff. It just really looks like she plays the left card every single way, and she's hitting every little high note on her website, and I don't know. I just don't know if that's and it looks like she's a Duck fan, so I'm not or her daughter graduated from U of O. So I don't know. I'll reserve my judgment. I don't know her at all. So all I can do is make judgments from the website. But I do know Goddard, and I think that she has been, I think, a good solid person to work with in the building. And so I think that matters, you know.
Oh, perusing our website, Sarah Beachy was also a delegate from Oregon to the 2024 DNC.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's kind of my point,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I just feel like
Yeah,
it just seems like
more of a
you're doing is pushing the left wing agenda versus actually trying to get stuff done for Oregonians. And I think that if you're in Congress and you're doing stuff or you're doing those sort of things, of course you have to have an agenda and you got to push that part of the agenda. And we do the same on the Republican side. But when you get down to the state rep level, I mean, this is truly nuts and bolts work. So you kind of want somebody who's there to do the nuts and bolts work and not focus on agendas, I guess, as much. So I don't know.
Yep.
Just
She's also got that Moms Demand Action kind of organizing
yeah,
stuff, which is the anti-gun people.
and that vibe. Yeah, whereas I think, Alexandria, I think it's great that she's got, the unions endorsing her and stuff. I mean, I don't mind. I don't like how the unions spend their money politically, but unions from the way they organize and do stuff and get involved. I think, some of these, in a way, isn't IBEW, isn't that our union? for
Yes,
staffers?
I'm not a member.
How does she
of
get
this
that
union.
endorsement?
Brett, should we do the thing and talk about the silliness that's happening with IBEW right now? Should we just blow that up? I'm so annoyed, Brian.
Yeah,
I just
go
can't
ahead.
even
Yeah,
tell you.
fire it up.
Okay, so they had a meeting. IBEW is currently negotiating our contract with the legislature. The first one runs out on December 31st, and day before Christmas, 2 days before Christmas, they let us know that they didn't accept management's offer, which includes, the COLA that most state workers are going to get, which is 6.5% on it hits January 1st. You start accruing it, and so it arrives for the first time in your February paycheck. That was part of the deal. Not a lot else had changed, but anyway, they come onto the Zoom, and I was able to attend because they allowed union members and then eligible to join the meeting. And I was eligible but have not joined. It's an opt-in union, probably because when they started the union, I said I have a Supreme Court right under the Janus decision to opt out, and I have action to sue you guys if you try to take any money out of my paycheck for union dues without my consent. So maybe that's why they made it opt-in. I don't know. But anyway, they explained to us how they're fighting for a permanent legislative 2 position through interim. Because a lot of what happens is you staff up for session, you can have a full-time L4, a full-time L2 in your budget usually, but you don't get that same amount of money for interim. That's not how it's deviated. They give you half a salary for an L2, give you a part-time L2 during it, basically, is what you're able to do. So they're fighting for full-time. And I don't know exactly what management is telling them, but whatever it was, it frustrated the union negotiating people. And so they were furious with management's offer, the folks that we've sent from our union to negotiate, and rejected the offer. And so management said, okay, we're not going to give you COLA, and we're not going to give you retroactive COLA. So I don't know if that's just positioning or what, but as of Friday, December 27th, when we're recording this, there's not going to be a contract with the union, and the union is even discussing going on strike. They think they have the ability to go on strike because the contract supposedly says that while the contract is active, we won't strike during session, but supposedly when the contract expires, that then we'd have the ability to strike during session. And I say we, not meaning me, because I'm not going on strike during session. As long as I get paid, I'm working, and I'll probably work even if I don't get paid, which is silly, of course. But anyway, this whole thing, I got really frustrated, Brian. I joined this meeting. I was like, what in the world are you guys doing? I don't think what they basically need is they need ways and means to commit to funding this. And what management is telling them is we're not going to pre-commit ways and means. You guys have to basically earn this in the session or whatever. by lobbying through a bill or getting the ways and means to fund it, where because most of the way we fund the government is not through salary amounts, it's through full-time equivalents, FTEs. They give you a certain number of FTEs, you can allocate. Sometimes they're required to be part of certain programs and departments, sometimes they're flexible. If you don't fill them, it's basically, we've talked about this, it's just a bunch of money that sits there they can spend on other stuff sometimes. So what I think the union wants is they want just 2 full-time FTE equivalents at certain levels, and they want them to run all the way around. I think that's great. I think that's fine. But they're trying to, basically threaten to strike during the most important time for the legislature, which is the long session. And they think that they have maximum leverage. And I don't think they do. On this call, I'm not going to say who said it, but on this call, they said that the management, which means the caucuses, House Democrats, Senate Democrats, House Republicans, Senate Republicans, were attempting union busting. And I think really what management is doing is just hard negotiating. They're in a position of strength on that front, I think. That's not union busting. So I did come on the call briefly and asked a few clarifying questions. And then at the end, I said, look, unless you guys are willing to call your bosses, talking to the Democrat staffers, I said, unless you're willing to call your bosses union busters in public, in the media, and you're willing to strike, this isn't going anywhere. You guys are going to end up accepting the deal management offered, or probably a worse one, frankly, if that one had a clock on it. So the legislative union is trying to strike. None of the media has picked it up yet. It's interesting to see that hasn't happened yet. I don't know when they'll pick it up, probably a couple of days before the new year or on the 31st. But right now, BW and the legislative aides, so no caucus staff is involved in this, no LPRO staff. This is just member staff, potentially are going into January 1st in a new session without a contract. And I think it's dumb because it's possibly costing us our COLA. And I'm annoyed, Brian. That's what I'm going to say. That's it. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to blow people up. I'm annoyed.
Well, we can let it go at that. How about let's I think that was a good rant. I obviously wasn't at the meeting and I could give two shits. So I'm glad you went and you represent me. Actually, what you should do is represent all of us that don't give two shits. We should have like a sub-union of the union.
I'll email all of you and ask for your proxies for the next.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Let me speak.
Jake and me and Drew and all of us that are.
The annoying thing is I might have to organize all you guys and have us become union members for a little while to like rattle the cages. So
that'd be awesome.
Go back to being normal, and then we can all quit again because I don't want to stay a member of the union.
Oh, that's funny.
It's so frustrating. But overall, I think if a union is functional, sometimes they can provide a benefit. I've seen that with other state employees who have benefited from being union represented. So
yeah. Well, let's pivot real quick off of that epic discussion into another epic discussion, and that's for the state GOP throne.
Yes.
I think that's we're at least a 7-way battle for being the top GOP chairman for the state party. And currently, Justin Wang is the current state chair of the Republican Party. He is going up against Gabriel Bueller, failed state representative candidate, didn't get through the primary. Now the Washington County chair. So yeah, he's pretty horrible. Jerry Cummings, Columbia County PCP in a pasture. No idea who he is. Ben Edel, another super failed. Former candidate and founder of every failure organization, Free Oregon, Ruck Pack, you name it, failure. But now he wants to fail up, which is usually the Democrat thing to do, is they usually fail them up, but hopefully we don't.
See, that's what I forgot to count, Brian. How big is the Ruck Pack caucus in the legislature this year? We'll have to go through and count. Because they had Hebe, they lost Hebe, and I don't think Drazen's a Ruck Pack member. I'd have to check, but I don't think she is. So I'll go through and I'll do a count for the next episode, and we can figure out how big the Ruck Pack caucus is.
Let the find out if Junker is part of the Ruck Pack. I don't know. I doubt even he wants to be affiliated with the Ruck Pack. So Richard Jolly, I don't know, Umatilla County. don't know the guy at all. I never heard of him. Joe Ray Perkins, of course, we have the Joe Ray line in Oregon because she always runs for U.S. Senate and loses with about 42% of the vote.
Current secretary of the Oregon
Current
Republican
secretary,
Party.
though,
Sends
and
out the
super
email.
nice. And I like Joe Ray, actually. I think she's super nice.
Albany resident.
Yeah, she cares about the party and stuff, but I mean, she kind of is a secretary. I don't know why she feels maybe she just doesn't like Justin. That's all I can think of. And then Angelita Sanchez, who was part of the Timber Unity movement. I won't claim that she was. I think she claims that she was the founding member, but I don't. I find that to be debatable. But and of course, one of the greater movements that happened in Oregon was completely just annihilated after they got the state reps to walk out and everything in 2020, and then they just imploded, and now they basically no longer exist. I think they have an email list, and that's probably what's left of Timber Unity. But she's a city councilor, and she, of course, wants to be involved in what's going on. Your neck of the woods too. There's two people from your neck of the woods there. So
yes, the Valley typically likes to represent, Brian. It's easy enough for us to get to Portland or wherever, and Salem. So I'd say the Willamette Valley, especially the kind of more southern part of the Willamette Valley, Eugene and Albany, tend to be overrepresented. Also in the legislature.
that's a good point.
But, I think that what's really funny is that originally the list got sent out without Richard Jolly, and then Joe Ray followed up and said that he did submit his notice or intent to run on time. It just got sent to spam. When your notice to run for chair gets sent to spam, that's a sign you're not supposed to be the chair. I think that's just a sign. I think it's just that, whoever is deciding, you're not gonna be the chair. You're getting sent to spam. So I'm sure Richard Jolly's a nice guy. I don't think that he is winning. I don't know anything about Jerry Cummings. Again, I would suspect he doesn't do that well. I think Ben Edel's problem is that he doesn't really have a lot to show for all of his activity, as you pointed out. Free Oregon. Oregon is under a super minority, not so free. I mean, we do have our freedoms in our Constitution, but I don't think those were from Ben Edel. And then you got Gabriel Bueller, and both of these guys kind of run in the people's rights type of PCP circles of the far right. I think these guys, I don't think it's a ranked choice election. If it is, frankly, I'd be offended because Angelia and I work together to help defeat ranked choice voting. And then if the Republican Party brings it in, I mean, what is even the point of what we're doing? So I think Ben and Gabriel are going to divide their votes early on. And even if one or both of them stays in the second round or the third round of voting, they're not the least, get eliminated without being able to coalesce your people together in these multiple ballots. It's really hard to get your momentum. The way Dan Mason won his national committeeman vote, I think against Gabriel Bueller, it was one of those guys. It was him and it was Solomon Yu, who are kind of more of the normal candidates. Solomon Yu dropped out, and that gave huge momentum to Dan Mason and allowed him to beat the other candidate. And without that happening, it's possible that Gabe Bueller, whoever it was that was running, would have won the national committeeman slot. And that's important because they go to the RNC. So if you send a non-respectable weirdo to the RNC, it's really hard to, work with them, get money from them, all that stuff. Dan Mason, super normal Republican. Lots of people have worked well with them, right? So I think the same thing is in the chair's race. If we have a weird chair, it makes it hard for the RNC to invest here and do anything here and build the party and all that stuff. And when we've had weird chairs in the past, all it does is create negative headlines for Republicans. They send out letters that do stuff like January 6th was an inside job or whatever. And then all of our House and Senate Republicans have to go, whoa, wow, guys, what you doing over there? That's not so good. So really what you want is the party not to be a headache. I think one of the great things about Justin, the party really hasn't been a big headache, haven't had a lot of negative headlines. They've even done some things that have been helpful, I think, to the caucuses, especially 2 years ago. I think, Brian, when you were working with them, there was some stuff that they did that made our money go further and was effective. I think there's lots more that they can do, hopefully, that Justin wants to work on in terms of building the party, keeping the party active, getting the party out to vote. Those are kind of the general things they work on. And then the caucuses are usually working on the candidates level. And a lot of PCPs get those confused. So it'd be nice to, continue the progress on that front.
Yeah. I think
Joe
just
Ray. Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say on Justin and I mean I'm friends with Justin. I would consider him a friend. I was a little, and he knows this. I was critical with him on a couple things that this cycle that I wasn't excited about that we were able to do last cycle, and but of course I wasn't running the caucus stuff, so I and he understands that stuff, but I think his challenges I think were just they're minimal things. Like the basics are there. He's got a lot of national connections. He's got a lot of friends across the country and stuff, and he's raised a decent amount of money for those sort of efforts, and did a an admirable job on the mail and some of the other things there. And there's part of his problem is the people underneath him and these county parties that just look to destroy him every time he turns around, and that
Right.
is it's like as soon as you get elected in the ORP, you literally have a bullseye on you, and that is well our Dallas Hurd learned that the hard way, right? So when he
Perfect dumb example. Justin tried to rebrand the Oregon Republican Party with the new logo. I didn't love the new logo, but I was like, okay, great, you got a new logo. There was like
yeah
a literal revolt over the
yeah
logo, and they had to put it back. That's how ineffective the ORP is. A lot of it is because the rules and the central committee of the PCPs can't approve or undo things that the chair and the executive committee
yeah
do. You don't have a lot of power, and it's only a 2-year post. There's so much that limits the chair and the executive committee from being very effective because they're micromanaged a lot of the time.
so
And so I
totally
think that
micromanaged.
that is such a problem. Hopefully we can make some progress on that
But
front.
Justin's
And
open to changes, and that's where
yeah,
him and I have had a lot of conversations, and Larry Morgan and those guys, and just saying, how can we make it better? How do we make our campaigns thrive better within there? How do we help them help us on the legislative stuff, right? Because they do other things that we're not engaged in, but I mean, it's really kind of always like, how do we help them help us? And he's always been open to that. And the other people on this list, I see them coming in with their own set of agendas
yep.
versus trying to say, how can we help you guys? Instead of, I always hear the other way around, the Ben Eddles of the world that basically say, just give me money,
Right.
and give me things. And they want to control the scenario. And that's not what the ORP is there for. The ORP is there to be the grassroots organization for the party. And I think that if they focused on that, then they would do better. And Justin's trying to right a ship that I think Dallas Hurd just completely blew up. And he's been getting there, and it takes a while,
I
So
also want to see a chair set measurable, attainable goals. And I think the biggest problem with Ben Edel is he's making promises that nobody can cash. I'm going to beat Rob Wagner. I'm going to beat Jules Walters. I'm going to end vote by mail. Dude, there's been no foundation laid for this stuff. Very similar, I think, to how the folks come from out of state and they try to pass ballot measures here. They're like, we're just going to completely change how
yeah,
everybody votes. And Oregonians go, you're going to what now? Like, there's been so many of these things where people just try to make unreachable promises, and then they don't even get close there. They crash and burn. And that would be Edel's biggest problem is he's going to write all kinds of things about what he's going to do as chair. I can't wait to see his letters and what he says about what he's going to accomplish as chair, and look at how all of them are just completely like impossible to do. But I
it
think that
is.
is a big deal. Brian, we could break some news on this program, or at least some rumor. I do hear that Justin has a decent endorsement that he may have. The rumor is that he's got a decent endorsement for his chair's race.
Break some news, Reagan.
Okay, well, I have heard that he may have the support of President Trump. I think the reasoning for this probably because that Justin was good in terms of supporting Trump and what Trump wanted to accomplish through the election, through the parties. But I think also benefits Trump to have good continuity instead of a lot of disruption. Because I think that creates less headaches for him. It makes it easier for his team that already has relationships with these parties to be able to continue to do what they've been doing and try to be more effective in the elections, effective in the midterms, all that. I mean, there's CD5, they're going to want that back if they can get it for Congress if Trump's successful, right? So I think that my expectation is that Justin Huang will have the support of President Trump, and it will be really interesting. I'm just going to put some people on notice. It's going to be interesting to see who votes against President Trump. Not that there's anything wrong with that, of course, but it's going to be interesting to see. And I wouldn't be surprised if Ben Edel is having some trouble getting some votes, just because he's actually kind of interesting to me because I don't see him tweet a lot about Trump. And I think that will be interesting. I will say for Angelita, I think that she has a lot of good qualities about her, and a lot that I learned working with her on NOAM 117. She's very passionate, worked very hard at organizing the grassroots, and I think was very effective in terms of getting people to oppose ranked choice voting and getting the county parties especially focused on getting voters pamphlet opposition statements submitted. We had just so many. You flip through the opposition on that, and there was all these ones that were, nice and glossy and carefully prepared and written up by all of the, alphabet soup groups from the left. And then you had this grassroots effort. Individuals, county parties, state party, all that stuff got together and put together their statements in there in opposition for ranked choice voting. And I think that she was effective on that. And I think if that is the kind of energy she brought to being chair, or if she ends up running for vice chair, whatever it is, right, I think that would be effective in terms of convincing the grassroots to focus on something that would matter, as opposed to either letting them all dissipate and go cause trouble in each of their little counties for each of their state reps and different regions. Getting them, the PCPs, unified, which is an incredibly hard thing to do, that would be effective. And so I think that if she can bring that kind of energy to it, she would be very effective. And Jo Rae, don't have any reason to dislike her. I just think that I haven't seen a lot from her in terms of the leadership skills, and so I would be interested to see how that would go.
Can she stay if she runs for chair and somebody runs for secretary? Can she go back to secretary if she doesn't win chair and run for secretary?
I think chair is the only one you have to declare in advance. So I think
too,
people who lose chair can run for other seats. So if you do really well, you come in second place as chair, you might consider running for vice chair. And Jo Rae, as being the incumbent secretary, I think would have an advantage trying to run again, potentially. Although sometimes being an incumbent in the ORP is not actually a good thing. Sometimes it's the mark of death.
Right. Well, if I was Angelita to wrap this one up, I would drop out of the chairman's race, throw my weight behind Justin, and run for vice chair, because that was a lackluster group running for vice chair. And Plowhead doesn't look like Angela Plowhead's running again. So I didn't see her name in that group. So the rest of them are very lackluster individuals. So if Angela Plowhead isn't running, because I heard she wants to run for Senate in Salem, state Senate. So that was the word on the street. So which I think she would be a decent candidate for against Patterson. I think that'd be great to have her run for that. Or maybe she could go back into
breaking news,
right? Or CD5 is open. So I think she would rather be a candidate. I think people either are really, really, you either want to be a party person or a candidate, or you want to do kind of what we do, behind the scenes work, right? So, and it's hard to do two out of those three. It makes it very difficult because party building is a technical job. It requires that ability to sit down and have long cups of coffee with lots of people over time and talk about, party first kind of stuff. But we'll see.
And
we'll see what happens.
I had this conversation with somebody before, Bryan, about when you become a candidate, what happens to you. People you've never met suddenly hate your guts and spend all of their effort trying to defeat you and send you mean emails and all this stuff. And you just go like, what the heck? What did I ever do to you? And the answer is nothing, except for try to, win a seat that's, represents the people or whatever. Right. Sometimes you have done something to people, but most of the time it's like, I've never met this person. Why do they hate me? And when you're trying to build a party, it's about relationships. And so when you have, up to half of the people hating you as a candidate, it's hard to be a candidate and also build relationships at the same time. And it's also, I think a lot of people think when you're a candidate and you're running, that you care about you, because all you have to do is advertise yourself and you're the one talking, you're the one with the power and whatever. And some people do have that egotistical reason for doing it. And some of this stuff you just have to do because you're a candidate to put yourself in front of voters. But people confuse that for, well, you don't care about the party, you only care about yourself. And so you're totally right, Brian. It's hard to be a party builder and a candidate. You can't be a candidate and a consultant. That causes so many problems. That came up, I think, with Julie Parrish, where she was a state rep and she was also, a consultant for some of the House Republicans. Like, it's just, it adds weird dynamics. You got to focus on your lane. Brian, you focused on your lane being a consultant, and then you try to advise the party builders, but you're not there building the party. Neither am I. I'm out here being a consultant. I'm a hired gun.
I've been in the party. I mean, Kevin Manning's.
And I have done it before too.
Yeah.
I
think
I was chair in Deschutes and chair in Jackson for a little bit, and that is hard.
And I love the party. I love the party building apparatus, and I think we need to do better at it, and we need to support that effort. And like fundraising and doing those sort of things so they can actually do the work. But it's tough. It's not easy work, and it's a hard thing to fundraise for too. It's pretty hard.
Totally
it's
agree.
easy to fundraise for. Anyways, hey, last thing before we break off and call it a year, huh?
Yep.
Best run campaigns in 2024.
Okay. Let's see.
Are
there any Republicans that won in 2024?
Right. Well, we can go to the primary. Let's start there. And you and I.
This is to be clear. This is Oregon, because if we were doing national, obviously it'd be Trump. Obviously. So for Oregon, we're talking about Oregon only.
Yeah. So I said, and you agreed with me here, that state rep Darren Harbick, now state rep elect Darren Harbick, beat Charlie Conrad 86-14. That's a trouncing and a good campaign.
Yes. And honorable mention too. That reminds me. Yes, I want to say that is an incredible primary win. I think when Canote beat Telfer's like 65-35. So to not even get a third of the vote as an incumbent is downright embarrassing, and just total kudos, because as an incumbent you have a ton of advantages in terms of the ability to fundraise, in terms of talking to voters and all that stuff, and Harbick was able to just blow him out of the water, and so frankly very impressive. Good for him. He turned his U.S. Senate campaign. He came in second, I think, very close to Joe Ray Perkins a couple of years ago. He's turned that into something useful. You always love to see candidates taking that name ID, doing something with it. So good for him. And then shout out to Paul Holvey for throwing a 90-10 down on his recall.
That was a good one. Yeah.
Despite not even going to run for another term. I mean, way to go out like a hero. just to straight up knife those guys. So those are two of the best run campaigns, especially in that kind of primary era.
And then I'll give in the primary world, and we'll just move on real quick. I think, and I ran the campaign against Noah Robinson, and he did a good job. He ran a good campaign. He raised a lot of money, and and I was quite frankly impressed. So, and Diane Lithicum, I think, did a pretty decent job as well and fended off some money coming in. So, both of them did a pretty good job, and they should take a bow. And there's nothing wrong with that. And hopefully they become great senators. I hope so.
I have high hopes for them. I think Noah Robinson could do a really good job, and I think Diane can do a great job. I always like working with Diane as a staffer, so I'm really excited to see her go into that role and hope she does well. And same with Noah.
And then going on, and then I would say that since we're still in that space, I would say that the CD3 race, Maxine Dexter just destroyed it. I think she was up against some pretty heavyweights there, especially with Jayapal and stuff. And she got some help from her friends, don't get me wrong, but or people that didn't want Jayapal, one of the two. But that's what it takes, right? It took
all that Republican money, Brian, coming flooding into that CD3 primary. That's
a lot of APAC money coming in too. So some Jewish money flowing in.
I mean that was a theme throughout Congress, and I think kudos to everybody who invested to really blow up the squad. They defeated 2 squad members, prevented the squad from getting bigger. That's good. All that can do is good. Did you see, Brian, on Twitter? Really quick tangent. Jamal Bowman, one of the squad members who lost, his inaugural leave, or his final speech in the House. There were 5 people that showed up, and it was the rest of the squad. The rest of the chamber was empty for his last speech in that Congress. And, for big senators, and there's a bunch of big senators, especially on the Democrat side, that are leaving because they lost. And there's, all their, bipartisan colleagues across the aisle. Only the squad showed up for Jamal Bowman. And I think that is hilarious.
That's hilarious.
Unfortunately, it ruins my opportunity to make jokes about Ben every time there's a negative release about Rep Bowman from New York. I always make fun of Ben, and I can't do that anymore, which is annoying, but such is life.
Yep.
All right, so what about the general election, Brian? Best run campaigns.
I'm gonna, I think
general.
The best. I'm gonna be kind of odd on this one. Is I'm gonna give it to Mayor-elect Keith Wilson. I think he kind of came out of nowhere, and who knows how he won with ranked choice voting and that bullshit. But
Brian, the fact that I think he won by having a clean driving record really is the answer. He just don't get 20 tickets and you become mayor of Portland. Who knew? Right. The driving records would show up.
20. She got 150, Reagan, and then she got one. Do you remember they gave her a hit and run like a week after the story came out? Like, it's just, I mean, she's got to be the worst driver on the planet. Like, there's.
And I think Renee Gonzalez had like 14 to 20 also. Yeah. And so Keith Wilson. Maybe he doesn't drive. Maybe that's the answer. Maybe he has a driver because he's the CEO, or maybe he takes his bike. I don't know. But yeah, Keith Wilson, the guy emerged out of nowhere, very much a dark horse victory type of a candidate. And
it was great.
Really, really impressive.
I think, and speaking of driving, Rick, here's the funny thing is we thought we had Senator Gorsuch, we're like, oh, he's got 19 speeding infractions and stuff like this. And then I looked at Raymond Love and he had 18, and I was like, what's up with these people? Is it people with bad driving records want to run for office? I don't know. I mean, it's not a disqualifier to me. It's just silliness is what it is. But
at least we know the OSP isn't looking up people's party registrations before they give them tickets. It's, it's all the way across the way.
True. I mean, I got parking tickets galore from my time at Portland State and working downtown. And I think even somebody put that crap on Twitter. Remember when I was banging on her? Somebody found my 10 parking tickets, and I'm like, I'm not running for mayor. It doesn't matter.
No, that's damaged reputation, Brian. You're never going to be able to get work after this.
Oh, yeah, especially do it. Yeah. And then I was going to give consolation prizes to MGP across the river. I think she did a good job with Joe Kent. I mean, I think her TV ads were the best TV ads I saw. And then I was also going to give consolation prize to Val Hoyle because she also dispatched Despain pretty handily in that race, with not a ton of money either. So, and then of course I'll give one up to my Senator Dick Anderson. I think that he did a really good job early that kept him polling too far ahead that the Democrats never put any money in against him. So he did the work there. 10 out of 13 mayors endorsed him, including Democrat mayors. Did the work that he needed to, but we never really saw a head-to-head, so I can't really move him up to running a great campaign. He just gets consolation prize. So, but he worked hard. And then my only last one that I had is I kind of came up with him was Politician of the Year. In national, I will give it to Donald Trump. I think he's clearly the politician of the year, clearly the winner of 2024. I mean, he made United States history, in this idea of, being in the national spotlight since 2016, now 45th and the 47th president. Just amazing. And then on the state side, I couldn't decide between Bynum and LCD. I don't like Bynum, and I really felt that she ran a very negative, horrible campaign from just attack. And I just, as much as I can respect the win, but I almost give it to LCD because she got a Trump appointment out of it, the labor secretary. And if you can spin a loss into becoming an appointed secretary to the president of the United States, I don't know how you top that. So I have to give that to LCD because her spin is Bynum now gets to run against the next person who's going to spend $20 million analyzing every horrible vote that she takes. And LCD gets to be the labor secretary. So I think that's kind of a win.
Lori Chavez dreamed of becoming labor secretary. I don't know if we drilled down on this when we did the episode. I'm trying to remember, but labor secretary in terms of the highest, where it fits in presidential succession, is the highest an Oregon person has ever been appointed to. Now, people argue with me and say Neil Goldschmidt got Department of Transportation, which is lower on succession, but obviously has more money. So hard to, you can argue the money thing versus, but in terms of presidential succession in a disaster event, Lori Chavez Dreamer, the best chance an Oregonian has of becoming president. And that includes Jeff Merkley trying to run for president. So honestly, I think Lori Chavez Dreamer is she wins it. I totally agree with you, Brian, on your arguments on that front. Couldn't really come up with a better name, especially because a lot of these things that happened in Oregon, I could try to give it to Ben Bowman, but I don't think I'm going to, because he barely ekes out a super majority, and frankly, I don't think he thought he was going to get one. It was kind of an accident, so I'm not going to give it to him. But he could be like a runner-up. So anyway, well, Brian, really appreciate it. Enjoyed having the podcast with you this year. Looking forward to a great podcast in 2025 and our 1-year anniversary of Crosstabs in early May of 2025. So looking forward to that.